Good afternoon and welcome to the 2017 Athena Lecture. The annual Athena Lecture was established in 2001 by the Academic Opportunities Committee to celebrate the achievements of women in science, engineering, technology, and medicine. It is given annually by a prominent female scientist. The Athena Lecture is coordinated by the Equality and Diversity Unit at Imperial, and I thank them for their work, their great work, for making these such a lovely occasions. We've had illustrious speakers such as Professor Dame Anne Dowling, President of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and Professor Dame Nancy Rothwell, Vice Chancellor of the University of Manchester. The past year has flown by since I was in this very same stage. I'm sympathetic to how you're feeling, and it has been quite a year. The world looks very different than it did in June 2016, and tomorrow things may well change again. It is therefore a great pleasure to welcome as this year's Athena Lecturer a woman who is an expert in managing change and navigating uncertain environments. I'm happy to introduce Sinead Lynch, Chair of Shell UK Limited. We are pleased to be working with Sinead at Shell, one of the college's longest standing and closest partners. Our work with Shell spans all of the college's activities. Shell is one of our largest graduate employers. They work with 9 departments at Imperial, and our research collaborations cover areas from mathematical theory of cash flow management in the energy industry to fundamental science projects focusing on reducing emissions and removing harmful contaminants from fuels and lubricants. Today, we have a wonderful opportunity to get to know one of the senior champions of the Shell-Imperial relationship. We will learn a lot from Sinead, and I think that she will feel right at home here at Imperial. Sinead is a scientist at heart. She began her career as a geophysicist, specializing in seismic processing and modeling, before taking on roles in exploration and development geophysics. She then moved into economics, as one does, of course, if one's an accomplished geophysicist. And this led her naturally into business and commercial roles. Sinead has spent most of her career at BG Group. So, of course, upon the announcement of the merger in 2015, they called upon Sinead to become the head of the integration planning team on the BG side, and she supported the ongoing transition of BG into Shell. Her career has taken her around the world to work in very different places and in very critical positions. Sinead has held roles in BG's operations in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. She served as VP Commercial for BG Nigeria, leading the company's upstream entry. This was followed by a stint as Area Commercial Manager for BG's Africa, Middle East, and Asia assets, before she took on the role of Head of Investment Appraisal for BG. She then spent 2 years in Bangkok as Asset General Manager for the Thailand asset. At BG Group, Sinead rose to be EVP Safety and Sustainability, covering 2 of the most pressing topics for the global energy industry. Her job description expanded far beyond the job title. Sinead has had a great variety of responsibilities, including the leadership and integration of BG Group's health, safety, and asset integrity, security, environmental and climate change, social performance, and human rights, government and policy affairs, and communications disciplines. That's a broad set of responsibilities. She joined Shell in the role of UK Country Chair on the 1st of September 2016. In this role, she is responsible for Shell's UK interests, including serving as the liaison with the government on energy strategy. Sinead is someone who embraces change, embraces challenge, and has successfully navigated transitions. We have a lot to learn from her, and it's a pleasure to welcome her here today. Thank you, Sinead. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you very much, Alice, for the introduction. I have to say, having spent decades nowhere near a lecture hall, this is the second time in about 3 weeks I have been in one, and I can confirm that you are definitely in the more relaxing seats. But I will start with a thank you. I really do want to thank Imperial for the invitation to speak at a unique event. I am really honoured, actually, to be asked to speak at an event that celebrates the achievements of women in science, in engineering, in technology and medicine. And I'm also humbled to speak at a college that has such impressive alumni. You know, people like Helen Kent Porter, a famous botanist and first female professor here. And I'm very conscious that my scientist days are some years ago. But I guess if my career path maybe tells us anything, it tells us that the sort of opportunities that are available from degrees in science and engineering are very broad. And indeed, many of them are opportunities that would never have crossed our minds at the start. So I was going to, because the title is about accidental executive, I was going to start by saying this absolutely and genuinely was not the plan to take a role like this. And in fact, there really wasn't a career plan. If anybody had asked me in the early days, when I was just finishing my degree, I would have said it was probably to leave Ireland, because I was very keen to work overseas, to get a technical job, to do some time with a big company, do a bit of travel, and then go home and probably teach. That was a sort of very high-level plan of where I was going to go. And I was reflecting when I was thinking about what I'd say here is my lack of a plan was a very common topic in my performance reviews and my annual development reviews throughout my career. There is a natural desire in corporates to have a plan, to be very clear on where you're going. And I look back at all the people that I have managed over 23 years, and I realized, actually preparing for this, that although I hate to generalize, there is no doubt that the vast majority of guys that I managed had a plan. They had a clarity about where they wanted to be in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. And the majority of women that I managed didn't have a plan. And so I think that does tell us something about diversity in all its different parts, and that you really do have to think about not just diversity through the gender lens or race or creed, but how people think and how they operate. And the lessons, I guess, I took from that would be that when you're on the management side of that, the person without a plan is not necessarily not ambitious, not material to be progression. They're just looking at the world differently. But also, I would flip that on its head, because I'm not advocating not having a plan. I think having a plan, if you can have one, is a really good thing. If you don't have a plan, as I didn't, then you need to be clear. You need to be clear on what you want, on what the role you're looking for provides. And I think I was always pretty clear on that. And certainly for the first decade or so, I was very clear that the role should be deeply technical. Very keen to stay technical. The role should stretch me, should provide learning opportunities. There should be travel, because I really wanted to work overseas. And there should be balance. I was very clear right from the start that I wanted a career, but I did want there to be a level of balance. And I think that's taken me to 3 things that I've learned, maybe, that have worked for me throughout my career before I sort of step into the journey, if you like. The first one was around following your passion. Very important to me that whatever I do energizes me and stimulates me and gets me out of bed. I think that's probably maybe less relevant in a university than in a corporate world, because it is possible, certainly in any environment, to be successful without that passion or energy. But I think it's difficult to be happily successful, for want of a better expression. It really makes a difference if you love what you do. The other piece is around taking risks and seizing opportunities, taking risks on yourself and finding people willing to take risks on you. And the third piece is around having the right support around you. I have benefited enormously throughout my career having the right support, both personally, in terms of my husband and my family, but also professionally in terms of some of the leaders that I have worked for. Okay, so if I then start at the beginning and take you a little bit through the career and some of the choices and the learnings around managing change. So I guess I was quite a nerdy kid. I liked science, I was good at science, I was good at maths. They came naturally, they made sense. in a way that languages and most other topics didn't. I worked hard, I was that kind of girl, but I had to work really hard to do well in languages, for example, and the science stuff came quite easy. And so there was no really big decision about what to do. I wanted to do a bachelor's of science, so I chose physics and applied maths. My thought in my third year was that I would do a PhD, and I headlined one up in magnetotellurics. But my final year project was very research orientated, and I spent quite a lot of time on my own in the bowels of the university, and I had a bit of a change of heart about whether that was really for me. So rather last minute, I decided to do a master's in geophysics. Not because I had any idea what one did with the Masters in Geophysics, I really didn't, but I had done a module in it in year 3 and really liked it, very interested in it. So I thought, well, it'll be a good way to spend the year, and then I'll think what next. And I loved it. I loved the application of physics and maths to something real, to seismic data, to analysing the subsurface, to finding oil and gas, to looking for shallow faults. Whatever the application was, I was really interested in. So very keen to get a job in geophysics. So very lucky, there wasn't a huge amount of jobs in 1993 in the oil and gas industry, but I secured a role with what was then British Gas. And I joined British Gas, working actually for a gentleman who sits over there at one stage in his career, as a seismic processing, as Alice said, and acquisition geophysicist. So very much on the very technical end of a technical discipline. So I was involved in designing seismic surveys, going on the seismic vessels and supervising them, and being involved in processing the data to get the best quality data such that we could interpret the subsurface and decide where oil and gas might be located. And I spent 8 years in very technical roles. I did move into more conventional geophysics roles, exploration geophysics, drilling wells on the North Sea, in Egypt and Trinidad, looking for oil and gas. I went to Milan for about 18 months, worked as a geophysicist there, and all in all, was really loving the job. But very, very aware that I wasn't ever going to be a great geophysicist, which came as a bit of a shock, actually. It turns out that I can't see in 3D. I have a real issue with the geology side of the geophysics. So the maths is easy. The geology was a problem. And to be a great geophysicist, you have to be a great geologist. I think for me, more and more, they were quite separate roles then. They're pretty much the same, much more integrated roles today, because the industry has moved on there. So I had that niggling worry about that I wasn't ever going to be good enough as a geophysicist. I came back from Italy, and I was given a role as a development geophysicist in the Blake oil field. And this was probably the first time, oil developments you have a very tight, very focused, multifunctional team. You have your subsurface people, your geologists, your geophysicists. You have your reservoir engineers, your drilling engineers, your facilities engineers. You have your economist, your commercial manager, your lawyer, and you're all working together to try and commercialize a discovered resource, a discovered oil and gas field. And it was a really interesting time. The oil price was about $15 a barrel. And it hadn't been that long ago that it had been $10 a barrel. And so this field did not fly at $10 a barrel. And so there was an awful lot of discussion around how many wells, what do we do if the oil price falls to $10? Do we hedge some of the production, sell it forward to fix in some MPV? We were drilling horizontal. We had to drill less wells, so we had to drill longer horizontal wells than we'd ever done before as BG. We'd never operated an oil field actually before as BG, which is what British Gas morphed into. And so it was a really exciting time, and I loved it. And I liked what I was doing, but I was actually far more interested in what everybody else was doing. And I made a pretty quick decision that actually I wanted to move. I wanted to move out of geophysics and the technical world that I knew I loved, but I also knew there were limitations in where I was naturally strong. And I wanted to be a commercial person, I decided. And once I decided, then that was pretty much it, actually. But it was quite an unusual career move. It wasn't one that people made. And so it took me a while to persuade everybody that this wasn't a terrible idea. And I'm not sure I ever completely persuaded them, but I was really clear that I was going to do it. And I could do it with BG, which was my preference, or I could leave. But I was doing it. And I had a good line manager, a very supportive one, who said, okay, well, he'd moved from not a technical discipline, but a technical discipline nonetheless into commercial role. He said, become an economist. Economics is the bridge. It sits between the sort of the commercial and the technical. It brings all the data together, the reserves in the fields, the production profile, the costs of building the development, operating it, decommissioning it. It looks at the fiscal regime, the commercial arrangements. And so if you do that, that will give you a grounding that frankly you don't have, because you just don't have any background in any of this area at all. And I thought, sounds eminently sensible, I'll become an economist. So I did. I did a lot of self-training, a lot of courses, reading in the evenings, teaching myself, learning on the job. And I did that, not for that long actually, about 18 months, because I was very clear on what the end game was, which is I wanted to be commercial. And so the asset I was in, the UK asset, was a very supportive asset. And so they gave me little projects, opportunities to prove, A, to themselves that I had some business acumen, because there was no obvious sign of that, but also for me to be sure. And so they let me sit in on negotiations, do some minor negotiations with partners. They let me present to government on, revising tax breaks for exploration wells. And they gave me enough exposure for me to know it was absolutely what I wanted to do, and for them to know that I was probably going to be competent in it. And I was also completely didn't care what I did. So that helped. All my peers on the technical were going up the ladder because, that's what you do when you're particularly in your career. There's sort of quite a steep progression of grades and salaries. And I completely plateaued for quite a long time. Didn't care. I was just loving what I did. So I took a job as a commercial analyst. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a drink. Okay, so I took a job as a commercial analyst, and I got to learn the role. And I found out that I was good at it. And I was actually much better at it than I was as a geophysicist, which was a bit of a shock considering the path I'd taken my entire life. It turned out that in the same way I couldn't see in 3D at all, agreements make sense to me. Somehow the maths of the economics and the subsurface and the frame of commercial construct and an agreement which brings it all to life and allows you to agree with government how you'll develop a field with partners, how you'll share costs, et cetera, it just worked. My head was wired for it. And so it was a very, very happy time, I would say. And as a result of this, because I was so passionate about it and I worked very hard, I ended up on BG's talent list, I suppose. I'm sure every company and university has them. The list of people who potentially could form part of your succession plan. And that I didn't want. And I was quite clear about that also. I had no interest in moving, actually, into senior roles. I didn't think it was me. Not so much because of the responsibility or managing a team, but more because of, the visibility, the public speaking, which I don't like very much, although I'm getting used to it, the sort of the pressure, I suppose. And also I looked at the senior echelons of our organization, and it was full of great people, strong technical people, leaders, but it was all male. And the culture did reflect that. And I didn't see myself in that at all, in fact. And they worked really long hours, they traveled a lot. I was still very, very clear that what I wanted was some balance in my life and that was not a place for me. And then maybe this takes me on to the next piece around, so you've got kind of following your passion, but then seizing opportunities and taking risks. So this wasn't a lesson that I learned. I didn't learn it quickly and I didn't learn it easily. So the first couple of opportunities or promotions, if you like, that I was offered to move to the next level, I said no to. And then I went on maternity leave, and towards the end of my maternity leave I had to go looking for a new job because mine had come to an end, and I got asked to apply for a role at the next level, and I was massively unkeen. But the guy that wanted me to apply was very, very good at sort of saying, well, it's a great experience, you can try, it's a good experience to do the interview, see what you think. And so I did, and I think because I had no expectation of getting it and was quite relaxed, I got offered the job. And but I've been thinking about the balance piece, and I thought, no, I can't do that level of job with a baby. So I went back and said, I'm really sorry, I don't think so. And anyway, I want to work 4 days a week. And people didn't work part-time at that level of the organisation. And he completely surprised me. Said, oh, fine, 4 days a week's not a problem. Come back, try it for 6 months. Let's give it a go. What's the worst that happens? You might as well take that chance. And I found out quite a bit later, he took quite a lot of criticism for that in the organisation because, to quote one guy at the time, women can't do these jobs part-time. Don't know whether that means men can, but anyway, there was definitely a lack of interest in the organisation in having people at that level on a part-time basis. But he didn't see the world like that. He very much saw strength in diversity and was very keen to try and create a diverse team. And he taught me a great deal, actually. And I remember one sort of off-site, and I think it was me and probably, there might have been a couple of women and then 30 guys. And it was one of these exercises to really look at what makes you tick. And so you were asked to choose out of, big box of words, what was the word that represents what's important to you at work? And then we had to go around the table, and everybody had to say, and I was towards the back end, and there was promotion, there was recognition, there was pay, there was sort of the usual things you might expect in quite a male-dominated culture. And I had chosen balance, which made me feel a little bit uncomfortable and out of touch with the rest of my gang, if you like. And he had chosen inner peace. And I thought, there you go, that you need people who think differently to help you think differently. For me, this was a very, very big learning. With his support, I managed to make it work at that level. I still did a lot of running, saw my husband and child, and got quite comfortable. And went on maternity leave again, came back to another very different job, which was the head of investment appraisal, Alice mentioned, in finance, which I didn't have any background in. But what I had learned through some of these changes was that I am nothing if not predictable when it comes to responding to change. So I always go straight to the reasons why it's a bad idea. Why? All the things I don't know, the people who could probably do it better, all the stresses, etc. And it took me a while to realize that that's just me. That is my coping mechanism. That's how I manage the stress of change. And everybody does that differently. But I think it's quite important to know how you respond, because once you understand that, you can manage it. Because once I know that this is how I respond to change, I can think, okay, all right, fine, let's make those lists. All the reasons this is not a great idea. All the things I don't know. Now let's put in a plan to mitigate that. Let's put in a plan to work through the things that I don't know and the people I need to get to know and the books I need to read. And that plan tends to play quite a big part in my early months in any new role. It always has, and that sort of allowed me to take a number of senior roles, but still at that level, which was just the level below the radar, if you like, in terms of senior management in a big oil and gas company. And then the next challenge was the offer of GM Thailand, so as a general manager, taking on the MD role for our business in Thailand. And that was quite a big decision. Because we'd always managed two careers. My husband worked full-time, I worked my 4 days, and that involved, a change to that involved him giving up his job. And that wasn't something that either of us took lightly, and there'd been other opportunities in the years before which we'd said no because he didn't want to quit his job, which takes you to that whole needing the support there for you. So he was very supportive of me taking an opportunity to do something very different and run a business, truly in a leadership role. He went out there, found a master's in INSEAD that he could do part-time from Singapore to Bangkok, and so we moved to Bangkok. And that was really my first big experience, I suppose, of truly standalone leadership. But I had, through all the other roles, realized by then that I was never going to fit that standard corporate mold. I didn't think the same way, I didn't communicate the same way, I didn't react the same way to things. And I was going to have to work, first and foremost, on being the best version of me and not worrying about being like the guys, because when I tried that, it didn't work desperately well. And so I went into that role very, very focused on how I would do this, my way. And that was quite empowering, actually. And I decided to not worry about how people had managed the asset in the past. I had my own business, and I could manage it however I liked. And that involved making a lot of changes in the business, involved setting a different strategy, being far more focused both on the sort of near-term deliverables, but also what we're trying to get to in the long term. It involved people development, some of which was great because I got to promote people who showed no ambition in their performance reviews, but were phenomenal and should have been in more senior roles. So I got to exercise some of that. It involved demoting some people and asking some people to leave the organization. But I had this always had this sense with leadership that if you're very clear on the values under which you're going to lead, then it is far easier to do the difficult things. And so we didn't really have that as a concept in BG then, but I brought in the values of BG Thailand. And they were around delivery, because at the end of the day, we're a business and there is a bottom line to deliver. But they were also around openness and honesty and caring. And we sort of put together a bit of a chart about how they would define how we treated each other and how we treated our partners, the governments, the NOC, etc. And so when it came to making difficult decisions, it was easier to do so because people were very, very clear. I was very open and honest about the why and how this did come back to the values that underpin the business. So it was a very rewarding very rewarding 2 years. And at the end of it, the natural next step was to take on an even bigger MD role. And I was offered a couple in the US and in North Africa. But, and here's the challenge of all this, my husband, he'd done his master's, he wanted to go back to work. And so therefore there wasn't a job, obvious next job for me to do. And so we talked about it, and these things are all about compromises, of course, and sacrifices, and he'd made his sacrifice. So we said, fine, and I told BG we go back, and they said, oh, I'm not sure there's a job, and I said, that's fine, I understand that, totally, this is my decision, and I understand where I've got to, and therefore there are not many jobs at that level anymore. And then BG got a new CEO, a gentleman called Helge Lund, who came to us from Statoil, where he'd been the CEO for a decade. And everybody was very excited about Helge joining. We'd had a bit of a churn of leaders over a number of years. We'd disappointed the market's expectations. And although we were starting to turn performance around, the culture in the company wasn't where it needed to be, and people were quite dispirited. So we were in desperate need of new leadership, and it was very obvious from the first time all the sort of leaders met Helge that this was going to be different. And so he called me and wanted to talk about a job. And I had a few ideas what it was, what the jobs were, and I didn't want to do any of them. So I had a good speech prepared about why they weren't going to work. And it's back to that whole knowing what makes you excited. I knew that the likely jobs he was going to offer me were not going to be exciting to me. Particularly because I wasn't mobile. Craig wanted to come home. So he taught me through this new organization of BG, including creating of a new division. Safety and sustainability, so pulling all that long list of functions that Alice talked about together into one. These were in multiple different parts of the business. Health was in one place, security, safety, asset integrity was in somewhere else. We had environment and climate change somewhere else. We had sustainability somewhere else. So this was scattered throughout the organization. He was redesigning the company, and he saw safety and sustainability were at the core of any company that wanted to be fit for the future. And as such, he wanted to bring them together, make them and give them a really strong voice at the executive. So the EVP, safety and sustainability, was a role on the BG executive. And I listened to him talk about this and thought, I wonder who's going to get to do that. And so then he offered the job. And I reverted to type. I'm being completely open here. I reverted to type and said, God, I didn't just say no, I said, God, no. And was very, very clear that I just about got my head around this level. And there was another level in between. And I was not ready to sit on an executive. And I could not understand why me? And I think he'd been forewarned this was a likely outcome. I had form. And so he spent quite a bit of time explaining the role and how he wanted to lead the company. That he wanted to lead and the culture changes he wanted to make. And it was very inspiring, but I was just still not convinced. But I went away, talked to my husband, did all the things you do. He gave me a week. And concluded that I'd been with this company for 23 years and I loved it. And I wanted to be part of making it better, of changing it. And a lot of the things that he had talked about in terms of values-led leadership, without knowing sort of the terminology, was what I'd sort of naturally put in place in Thailand, and so I wanted to do it again. And so I said yes, and I took the role. And then, must have been about a month before I started in the role, Royal Dutch Shell made an offer for BG Group, and BG board recommended to the shareholders that it was accepted. So that put a bit of a cloud in the plan to transform the company, if you like, or at least the transformation was going to be slightly go differently to what we would have expected. But I still took the role because it was a different type of role then. It was about building a new community and then supporting that community fundamentally through a very difficult program. About, 6 weeks into the role, Helge asked me to come to a meeting with him and Ben van Beurden, who was Shell's CEO and Shell's CFO, and a gentleman called Hubert Vigaveno, who was going to be Shell's lead for the integration. And we had a good meeting around how we might start to plan the integration. And I was asked to take on leading that from the BG side. And that was a huge step into the unknown, but for everybody. None of us had ever merged companies before. And without getting into the detail of it, actually some of the fundamentals of what you do in any job applied exactly the same way. What is your ambition? And what are the drivers for that ambition? And what's really important? People, value delivery. What are the principles under which you're going to make decisions and then get the best people around you? Exactly the same sort of general learnings that you have in any project applied to merging two huge corporates. And so that was a whirlwind of a year. And the company integration largely complete by September last year. So record timing, these things normally take years. So we had largely integrated the companies in about 10 and a half months and over-delivered on the synergies, and very successful. And as our ambition was a world-class integration, that was good to see some of those sort of performance measures start to deliver. And then I joined Shell, took on the role of UK country chair, which is a very different type of role again. So in this role, I am responsible for really representing the Shell businesses in the UK. So a huge amount of the role is, as you'd expect, externally focusing, working with valued partners like Imperial, analyst, working with business associations, other companies, and of course working with government. So a lot of engagement with government on everything from Brexit to energy policy. But there's also quite a strong internal element to the role, which is representing the interests of the 6,000 Shell people in the UK. And so there's quite a bit on the HR side of things, policy changes, communication, making sure that I am aware of what's worrying our people and communicating appropriately to support them. The role also looks after crisis in the UK. So very, very broad role. And the final piece to it is energy transition. So we are a company that are absolutely clear, you won't be surprised, that climate change is real and that we are going to have to move the global energy system to a considerably lower carbon state. And this is complicated and global and multi-decade, but actually transitions are going to happen at the end of the day locally. There'll be some cross-cutting technology pieces, but the transition UK's transition will be a very UK-specific transition pathway. And so we need to see, well, what does that mean for a business like Shell? And in the very short term, it means how do we make our operations as efficient and clean as possible? But in the longer term, how do we reshape our portfolio? What are the new business models, the new technologies, the new energy services that we'll need to supply to consumers as their demands change? And so I'm responsible for looking at that for the UK. So I was going to finish up with the balance piece, because I sort of mentioned it quite a few times through the talk, but it's very personal and it's different for everybody. What's balanced for me will not be balanced for somebody else. And so first of all, you have to be very clear on what balance looks like to you, I think. But for me, it was very much around being part of my family's life, seeing my friends, having time to do the things I enjoy, as well as the career piece. And I would say that it was possible to do that for a long time. So you don't ever have balance. There's days where the balance is horrible and there are weeks where it's horrible. But overall, on average, most of the roles I did, all the way up to the executive level, it was possible with supportive organization, with the right line manager support. And I was kind of reflecting as I thought about today. That's quite impressive in the oil and gas industry, because it's not easily done, even in any industry, and we're quite a male-dominated industry still. I would have to be brutally honest and say that balance went out the window when I took on the executive role. It was not possible to have any kind of balance in my life at that level. Whether it would have been in a world without the Shell takeover, maybe I could have got there, but certainly with the integration planning and everything else. And I realised that after about 2 months, and I was quite miserable about it, because I had very, very clear priorities, and I was not there for the kids, and I was frankly stressed and snappy. And that's not who we are as a family, and it's not who I want to be. And so my husband and I sat down and had a long chat. Because this is all about conscious choices. Make your choices consciously, take control of them, own them. And we said, okay, so 3 choices. I tell Helga I'm not doing integration planning, find somebody else, which was one I quite liked. Quit, but I had quite a long notice period, so that was going to be tricky. Or just kind of accept that for a period of 12 months, our family life was going to be skew-iff on the balance front. And we decided that I've been with that company a long time and I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to create an integration that was fair to people, where BG people were treated well and got a good shot at a role. And so on balance, the sacrifice was worth it. And so we just accepted that for a year, our family life would be not what we wanted it to be. And that was absolutely how it outturned. And so when it came to talking to Shell about the country chair role, I was back to, I'd love to do it, but 4 days a week. I need to get that balance back in my life. And I'm still working on that. It's a big job. There's quite a lot to learn. As such, I've realized that I'm probably less balanced and more integrated at the moment. So, I work on my day off. It's sort of unavoidable. But I also leave when there's a play or sports day to go and see it. I think all in all, I'm beginning to get the hang of it. And this is all about choices and sacrifices and being mindful about those. And because at any one point in time, you want to be able to say, well, this is hard, but I knew this and I chose this. Because otherwise, you tend to find yourself accidentally in the wrong place, I think. So that's me. I wasn't really going to say anything else apart from I do expect that whatever comes after this role, exactly the same drivers about being passionate and interested in what I do, taking risk and continuing to learn and having that sort of supportive network around me, they're still, and having balance, they're still and always going to be the things that matter the most. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're all invited to the lunch afterwards, and Sinead has very kindly agreed to stay for another hour, so there'll be more opportunity if you want to talk to her. But I just want to round off the lecture by just a few words of thanks. First of all, thank you to all who've helped organise the lecture. Today, as always, it has gone really well, so thank you for those who are involved in the organisation. But I want to thank Sinead for what has been an absolutely inspiring talk. As many in this room know, we are on a journey. We are on a long journey to support and champion women in STEM. We know there is no magic bullet, but we do have a number of tools in our toolkit, and one of them is to identify and give a voice to outstanding female leaders. And the Athena Lecture is one way that we do that every year. And to the extent that, or if we did have a checklist of what we want and hope and expect from an Athena lecture, Sinead, you've ticked every box. It's been absolutely fantastic. Because when we Google you, as we do, who will we get? Oh, Sinead Lynch, yes. And we Google you, and we see your biography online, and it is so impressive. She did this, now she's up there. And it looks so effortless. That must have been so easy. And yet you come today and you tell us that it actually wasn't easy. And by telling us about the challenges and the difficulties and the sacrifices along the way, it makes it even more inspiring and real to us. And I would suggest that you are such a superb leader because it wasn't easy for you, and you did have all these challenges to face and overcome along the way. And so much of what you said resonates with us. So these are things I took away from it, that the lack of a plan is often quite a good plan, not because you sort of end up via some random walk getting to where you want to get to, but because it gives you a different perspective, a broader perspective. You're not obsessed by some narrow career plan that you're operating from. You have a broader perspective, and so not having a definite plan can often be a big help. Following your passion was another thing that you said, seizing opportunities and taking risks. The whole balance thing is something that's very much important to us here at Imperial, the importance of work-life balance. And I was struck with your 4 days a week story because that's something we face as well. You have the job advert, important job, man wanted, must work full-time. We should challenge that. Does it have to be a man? Of course it doesn't. Does it have to be full-time? Often it doesn't. And we're now encouraging our own colleagues, and when we advertise jobs and encourage our colleagues to go for jobs, to challenge this idea that it doesn't have to be full-time. Because when you look in detail, in fact, most of the jobs that we have here can be done on a part-time basis and can be done flexibly. Something else you said, being the best version of me rather than trying to copy someone else is a lovely soundbite. And then you talked about the creating the culture in the company, and that's important to us as well. Culture is very much a topical word around Imperial College. So thank you for those inspiring thoughts. And on a personal level, I was just fascinated because quite a bit of what you said resonated with with me. Okay, we're both from Ireland. I don't have 3D vision either. So, is there something growing up in Ireland where it's a bit flat and 2D is enough? I don't know. I learned that you did a physics and applied maths degree as I did. And then you talked about the geophysics and going off in that direction. The very first job interview I ever had was with Schlumberger, who are the world leaders in oil field services. And so I went for an interview and they put me through some kind of test, one of these psychometric tests, and rejected me actually very quickly. I didn't get beyond the first step because they obviously thought I wasn't safe to be let out on the real world or something. But anyway, and then my career went off, dived down into the subatomic world, which is where I spent my life. So I think, I speak for all of us, we take away a lot from what you said collectively and also individually. So a massive thank you to Sinead. Thank you very much indeed.